While most of Ahsoka was an unquestioned success, the series' penultimate episode was a bit of a letdown. Plot-wise, not much happened because Dreams and Madness was all about setting up the finale. Ahsoka reunited with Ezra, and Sabine started to prove her potential by hearing Ahsoka's call through the Force. Meanwhile, Baylan abandoned Shin to chase after something that was much more powerful than anyone expected. With the heroes and villains positioned for a massive confrontation, fans expected something big and dramatic in the finale. However, that's not really what they got. Dave Filoni put his storytelling reputation on display in The Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord because it left fans wanting more. Besides everything that happened, it set up multiple facets of Star Wars' future. The thing that has fans most excited is Thrawn's return to the known galaxy, which effectively began the canon version of Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire series. Except there's one key change coming, and it has everything to do with Ezra Bridger. Early in the Ahsoka series, Ahsoka warned that Thrawn could emerge from exile as an heir to the Empire. While that title rolls off the tongue, longtime Star Wars fans knew that it wasn't just a random choice of words. They recognized Heir to the Empire as the first book title in Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy from the 1990s. While it wasn't written or even planned by George Lucas, the Heir to the Empire trilogy is still one of the most iconic stories from the early days of Star Wars Expanded Universe. Here's what happened. Set 5 years after Return of the Jedi, Heir to the Empire introduced Grand Admiral Thrawn as the next big threat to the Star Wars galaxy. Thrawn was an immediate success because he was so different from the other bad guys in the franchise. Rather than being a rough and tumble evil villain, Thrawn was cunning, ruthless, and an expert strategist. Timothy Zahn once said, "Readers like their villains to be a challenge to the heroes because that forces the heroes to bring their best game to the field. The more clever the opponent and the more difficult the fight, the more satisfying the victory." Clearly, Zahn was right, because Thrawn's character gave Luke and company some of their biggest challenges. Thrawn was stationed far from the Death Star in Endor when the Empire fell, and he took his time planning his rise to power. Eventually, he struck. He wanted access to Palpatine's abandoned storehouse on the planet Wayland, but it was guarded by Jorus C'baoth, a twisted clone of a long-dead Jedi Master. So Thrawn obtained several salamander-like creatures called Isalamiri, which naturally subdued force powers in others. Using their abilities, Thrawn subdued C'baoth. Defeated, the evil clone agreed to assist with Thrawn's schemes in exchange for something very specific. He wanted Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa so that he could make them into his dark apprentices and twist them for his own purposes. Thrawn agreed to C'baoth's terms, and because he had access to Palpatine's technologies, his plans really started to ramp up. There was a ghost fleet of dreadnoughts called the Katana, Admiral Akbar was arrested for treason, and there was even an evil clone called Luke. Not to mention, the real Luke met his future wife, Mara Jade. The trilogy came to a head with a well-planned strike on Mount Tantus. Led by Luke Skywalker, all of the heroes confronted Thrawn and his minions. In the end, Mara Jade killed C'baoth, and Thrawn's own bodyguard killed him. Thus, Luke and company preserved peace in the galaxy. Clearly, Disney is setting up a canon version of the Heir to the Empire series for Dave Filoni's Star Wars movie. Thrawn has been missing for years, and now he's returned to take his place. With Moff Gideon possibly dead, there will be no one to keep Thrawn from taking over the Shadow Council and waging war with the New Republic. Everything seems well and good, and Legends fans are probably rejoicing that Heir to the Empire is finally being adapted into canon. However, there's a major Luke Skywalker problem. Luke was a major part of Timothy Zahn's trilogy. Moreover, he was about 30 years old at that point in the timeline, so it's not like Lucasfilm can simply call up Mark Hamill and put him into their Thrawn story. He would have to be de-aged, and that might be annoying for a feature-length film. Not to mention, it would be extremely expensive to de-age Mark Hamill or deepfake his face for a whole movie. And that's not even getting into the ethical dilemma behind extensively recreating actors and actresses' faces or voices. With that in mind, it's unlikely that Dave Filoni's Heir to the Empire story will be able to feature Luke in the same way that the original trilogy did. So what then? It's not like he can be excluded under the pretense of being away on some far-off mission. Legends fans would probably riot, and Luke being out of the picture while Thrawn was terrorizing the galaxy feels out of character anyway, so he'll have to be involved in some capacity, probably in a limited fashion, just like he's been a small but important part of the Disney Plus live-action series. But with Luke out of the picture and Ahsoka out of the galaxy, at least for now, Dave Filoni needs a protagonist for his Heir to the Empire movie. Luckily, he already has the perfect candidate in Ezra Bridger. Ezra wasn't in the original trilogy, and he wasn't in the prequels. He was introduced in Star Wars Rebels, and as a relatively new character, he wasn't as important as some other fan favorites like Luke or Anakin. However, Ezra has carved out his own little fan base. Since its release, Rebels has become a fan favorite series, and Ezra was the anchor for that show. His charisma was contagious, his resourcefulness was imitable, and by the end of the series, he had fully embraced what it meant to be a sacrificial Jedi. He summoned a pot of Purgle, which drug Thrawn and the Chimera into hyperspace. The only problem was that he was stuck on board when it all went down. So he was lost in oblivion for nearly a decade before Sabine found him in Ahsoka. Thrawn had no way of knowing that Ezra was going to pull a Purgle trump card, but as a skilled tactician, the defeat bothered him. He even told Morgan Elsbeth that he would never again underestimate the abilities of a single Jedi. Except that's exactly what he did in the Ahsoka finale. He thought he'd won by leaving Ezra, Ahsoka, and Sabine behind on Peridea, but he was sorely mistaken. Ezra made it onto the Chimera before Thrawn could jump to hyperspace, so Ezra will once again be in a position to thwart the Grand Admiral's plans. In one of the series' last scenes, Ezra returned to the New Republic and reunited with Hera and Chopper. It was a great moment, but the relief that Hera felt will only last a moment. The news that Thrawn is back will undoubtedly set things in motion. Naturally, Hera will do her best to mobilize the New Republic's fleet, but there needs to be a Jedi at the helm, and Ezra is the best candidate to lead the charge. He spent time fighting Thrawn as part of the Rebel Alliance, and he spent the last decade fighting Thrawn's night troopers on Peridea, so no one is more suited to lead the New Republic against Thrawn's growing Imperial remnant. And maybe that was Ezra's purpose from the very beginning. Maybe Dave Filoni always intended for him to face off against Thrawn. In fact, in the canon version of the story, Ezra is probably a better adversary for Thrawn than Luke. Of course, Luke will always be one of Star Wars' best, but Thrawn has personal history with Ezra. Their rivalry goes back a full decade, and seeing that play out on the big screen would be a treat, especially after Imanis Fondi's Rebels' accurate portrayal of the character. So by focusing on Ezra Bridger and his Heir to the Empire movie, Dave Filoni would accomplish two things. First, he would solve Disney's Luke Skywalker problem and ensure that he wouldn't have to be heavily featured. But Filoni would also make sure that Ezra has a lasting purpose. His character development was really taking on new heights when Rebels ended, so giving fans more time with him would be much appreciated. But what do you think? Is Dave Filoni setting up an Heir to the Empire movie? Will Ezra Bridger take Luke's place in that film? And how will an Ezra and Thrawn rivalry end? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.